Welcome to the Content 10X Podcast, the show where content creators learn how to harness the power of content repurposing. And now, your host, Amy Woods.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Content 10X Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, and this week we have a great guest on the show. So actually a returning guest, which hasn't happened very often, so that says a lot. It's the king of membership sites, Mike Morrison. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I like that title. I want that on a badge somewhere, the king of memberships.
I was playing around with that. It was various things I was going to say, and then I decided, actually, when we were at Retain, you said the queen of content repurposing, and I think you're the king of membership sites, so there you go.
Exactly.
So returning, so you were on episode 13 back in January 2018, so it's been a while, so I think you were due back.
Wow, I hadn't realized it had been that long. I was thinking it only seems 2 minutes since I was last on the show. I like the fact that you're repurposing guests now. Like that's the ultimate meta level of a repurposing podcast. You're repurposing all guests. I love
only the top
only
guests.
The good ones. Only the good
ones. So just to introduce you fully to my to listeners, I'm sure most people are aware of you, Mike, but I'll let everyone know. So Mike's the co-founder of the Membership Guys, where he helps people through their memberships through e-learning businesses, online communities, along with Callie, and you've got over 16 years. So last episode was 15 years, 16 years experience in digital marketing, online business, works with multinational brands and helped, the driving force behind lots of 6- and 7-figure membership businesses. And also Mike speaks on stages all over the world, so social media marketing, podcast movement. We were both at Podfest earlier this year. Youpreneur. I think you speaking at is it Anne Handley's event?
I'm not anymore. Unfortunately, we had to change plans around that. But I'm at Atomicon.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So all around the world and on your home turf over in Newcastle next year as well, which will be nice at Atomicon.
Yeah, definitely. I'm getting much lazier. As I'm getting older, the distance that I'm traveling to speak at events is getting smaller. So yeah, my last 2 events have been literally 15 minutes from my house. It's awesome.
Yeah, and that's a great lead on. So I was going to firstly say congratulations on Retain. It was an absolutely awesome event that you guys put on last month. And for anyone listening who is not familiar with Retain, would you like to just explain a bit about, what that was, what the event was, how it went? It'd be great to hear.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much. We've been blown away by the response to that. And of course, you were one of our fantastic speakers at that event. Your session was awesome. I've seen the feedback from it as well. There's some amazing feedback for your session. Yes, thank you for that. So Retain Live, it was a really, really specifically targeted event centered entirely around membership growth. So it was an event for people with online membership businesses, specifically ones who were already up and running and who were looking for ways of growing. So we ran it over 2 days. We had fantastic speakers, yourself, Janet Murray, Mark Asquith, Andrew and Pete, Diana Tower, Jess Lorimer, Chris Ducker. We had Jared and Scott, 2 very successful music membership owners. I'm now panicking that I'll have missed somebody, but I think I may have got everybody. It was just 2 days. Membership owners from all around the world, literally, descended on my hometown to hang out and learn about how to grow their memberships. And it was the very first time we've run an event like that. And it went better than we could ever have imagined. And I'm still kind of in that afterglow of that whole event. It was so much fun. And I can't wait to do it again.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely brilliant, and every aspect of it was fantastic. And I feel like because it was so niche, but so specific that there were so many wonderful conversations that were going on in every break and during lunch. And as you said, great speakers, and you guys took care of every little detail. It was just fantastic, and I'm sure everyone was keen to know when the next one will be as well. So I always have my repurposing hat and a keen eye for repurposing. And I really wanted to bring you back on the show to talk about the surprise at the end of day one. So at the end of the first day, you surprised everybody with a book, and no one knew that you were bringing this book out. I didn't know, and I feel like you told me a lot of things that you didn't tell me. So, and it was what was so wonderful about this book is I feel like it's a really epic example of repurposing as well. So can you just tell us a bit more about the why and the how you created the book and all of that?
Well, first of all, the reason you didn't know about it and the reason nobody knew about it is we weren't 100% sure we'd pull it off. We didn't know that we'd get it done. And you've gone through this process now with your fantastic book that I can't wait to properly get my hands on. You know, it's not an easy process. Even just the mechanics of pulling a book together, whether it's written from scratch or whether it's based on repurposed material, there's so many things to do. So we didn't know that we'd be able to pull it off, considering that we were organizing our very first conference. During the time we were organizing the conference, we also rebranded our entire business from top to bottom. And we were also working on a software product that we also announced at the event, in between obviously running our membership as well. So we didn't know that it would happen. We had the idea in our head that we would love to be able to bring a book to the world at our event. So our event wasn't set up to be a revenue generating thing. We were doing this because we just thought it would be so much fun to bring together our people from our membership into one place and just watch the magic happen with all the brain power and the experience in the room. So we were entirely just focused on how can we make this event as awesome as possible. And the idea of having a completely surprise book launch, like as the ending to day one, we just thought that would just be so cool. We'd seen Chris Ducker do it at Youpreneur. It went down so well there. It stuck with me as a really memorable moment. And I just dug the idea of being able to drop that bomb at the end of day one. The problem was that we didn't want it just to be any old rubbish, right? We wanted it to be good. So how do you write a book that is worthy of you and your brand and your audience while you've got a million and one other things going on? The original hope was that it would be a book we wrote entirely from scratch. Yeah, like all original material. In fact, we started on that. We started writing it, and about a third of the way in, and my partner Callie, she was doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the initial drafting of the book and writing some of the initial chapters. We just realized there was absolutely no way we could create our magnum opus while everything else was going on. So we shelved that idea. And it just so happened around about the same time. So we've got two podcasts in our business. One is the main show. It's a bit like this show. There's a lot of tips and advice, and every episode is really tactical, and we have some great guests and stuff. But then our second show is called Behind the Membership, and it's a one that entirely features conversations with membership site owners, where we dig into their story. It's really honest. There's no fluff. It's not a platform for people to blow their trumpet. It's the highs, the lows, the dirt, the wins, the failures of running a membership. Mm-hmm. And we knew that was real powerful stuff. It's a seasonal show. So it doesn't get quite as big a push or as much exposure as a regular show because it's sporadic, right? So we knew there was more mileage in those and that we could do so much more to get those stories out there. And the original plan for that was we'd actually hired a writer to work with us to turn those into short case studies. Rather than just putting a transcript or anything like that, we were repurposing those episodes into case studies that we would use in our marketing, that we'd maybe publish some as blog posts. Mm-hmm. And I think we had all the ones from the first season done, and we've had them for like a year or two. We just never gotten around to actually using them in our marketing. And we didn't want to just stick them in a PDF or just put them on a blog post. We wanted to do something good with them, right? Mm-hmm. So completely separate to the whole process or plan to write a book, we'd also we'd gone back to the same person we worked with on the first season, turning those into case studies to get her to do season 2 and season 3. And when they came back and we were looking through them, we were kind of like, this would be a good concept for a book. We had 30, I think it's 30 or 31, maybe even more, real interesting stories. And these case studies were only really scratching the surface. So we thought we'll just compile them into a PDF. We'll use it as an ebook, a giveaway. But we were like, you know what? There's so much more we can do with this. We can take this so much further. And that's where we decided that actually this would make for a fantastic book. And we could probably get it together in time for the event to have that special secret reveal. But also we could create something that not only like got these stories out in more detail to more people, but would also enable us to create something that was a little bit like, the Ask Gary V book, which I think he was repurposed from his podcast. Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss, which again was repurposed from his. We really dug the idea of having a book that was a bit like that, where you could dip in and dip out. You didn't have to read it chapter to chapter. If you're having a cup of tea, or as many do, you're having a bathroom break and you need a bit of reading material. We just like the idea of someone being able to just spend 10 minutes with our book and actually get some real value out of that without needing to set aside the afternoon to read the rest. Or a book where people might scribble notes, or put little post-it notes, or a book like take photographs of pages because it had inspiration and ideas. We really dug the idea of doing that, and we realized that when we were looking at these case studies, that that was such a great starting point for what we could do to take those further and to expand on those and turn it into a book.
So basically, you were at the point where you were trying to write the book that was going to go out at the event. And then it all just naturally happened that you sat there with all these case studies in front of you that are so well written, and you think, wow, actually, let's change approach, because this is our book. We're holding our book in our hands. We've got all these case studies.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So that original plan for the book would have been a little more in keeping with the theme of the event, but just the amount of work that would be needed in creating all that material from scratch, we wouldn't have been able to do it justice. We wouldn't have been able to write the book we wanted to write. And, at the same time, as we said, we'd already been trying to explore ways in which we could extract and tap into the stories from the Behind the Membership podcast in a better way, because there's so much gold and value in those podcasts. There really, really is. These are people from all sorts of different backgrounds with all sorts of different journeys, lots of real useful tactical info, and not everybody listens to podcasts.
No,
and especially when it's seasonal, it's obviously, you get 10 weeks worth, and then you've got the rest of the year until the next thing. So there was so much value within that content, but it was locked down in just the podcast. And actually seeing that initial iteration of, okay, well, what happens if we actually try and tell these stories as words on a page? That was that spark. There was still a lot of work to do after that. I think overall we probably tripled the word count from what those case studies. Those case studies were written to be articles on a website or emails we sent to our list. They weren't written as chapters in a book. So we had to rework a lot of those original case studies and expand on them with a lot of original materials, kind of taking some of the big takeaways further and giving our take on them and our input, or just a little bit more exposition into kind of the situations that people were talking about. So we still had to put a lot of work into it, but we were able to kind of fast forward through a lot of the ideation, a lot of the initial kind of framework that you have to put into a book. And we already had such a solid starting point in that came from repurposing that podcast content.
And a question that I wanted to ask you. So you mentioned that in the form that you had back from your writer, you added loads to it, as you just mentioned. But originally, it was going to be more for like case studies on the website, emails, things like that. Yeah. So have you, or do you plan to still do that repurposing? Are you still going to put some of these as, say, blog posts or articles on your website and send out to emails, membership content? Or are you going to keep this more firmly as a podcast and a book now?
I've got a feeling that we probably won't publish any of the case studies, the original case studies, or even the chapters in the book that they turn into. We probably won't put them out as blog posts, but I would never say never on that front. What we're more likely to do is cherry pick maybe like 10 top takeaways from the Behind the Membership book and actually put those out into a blog post. In fact, I think we already did that for season 1 of the podcast. So we were able to just grab different quotes or different takeaways from each episode, I think, for season 1 of the show, which we've not yet done with season 2 and 3. But if we were to do that now, we actually have a better base of content to pull that from. We're no longer, we don't then have to get them go to the transcripts and then try and parse that into a format that's suited to a blog. So we might do that as well. It's always a little tricky. I remember the very first book I wrote back in 2012, which was it was a more broad kind of marketing book, and that was like 101 top tips. It wasn't ever meant to be a proper book. It started as a blog post that got out of hand. And I remember with that I thought it would be really easy to then repurpose. I was repurposing back in 2012. Are you proud of me?
Yeah, I'm really proud. Yeah. It's wonderful.
I thought it would be really easy with 101 essentially standalone chapters in a book to be able to repurpose them into blog posts. But I actually found it a little challenging in choosing which ones to do and also kind of making sure there was enough variety and it lined up with other content that was going out in the blog and stuff. So I don't know if it would be the same in trying to repurpose from the book and the podcast to blog posts. So I'm not sure, but it's nice knowing. I think now if we decide to do that, I think it'll be easier to do it because I think sometimes making the leap from audio to written, personally, I find it can be challenging because you don't write as you speak and you don't speak as you write most of the time. But now we've kind of closed that gap a little bit. Then I feel it'll be easier to spin some of the stuff that's being created for the book into other written formats than it would be if we were just looking for other ways of just using the audio.
Yeah, completely agree. I always say that when you take video or audio content and get that into written content, it just opens up a whole new world of repurposing opportunities, because it's not just there. You can wordsmith this into another article, you can wordsmith it into an email, you can wordsmith it into social media posts and all kinds of things like that. So there's just so much more you can do when you put it into written format, isn't there? I really love what you did, because I think that there's so much effort that went into all these wonderful interviews that Callie did on the podcast. And then the book, as you said, it's a little bit, it's the kind of book that you can just pick up and you can be inspired because it's actually story. So it's not a heavy, hard-hitting kind of implementable, resource, like resource and textbook type book, is it? It's stories that are inspiring, but also provide you with guidance and advice and the ups and downs as well. It's just what people want to kind of pick up, and you can read from start to finish, or as you said, more just pick up and read sections when you choose to. Whose story do you want to find out about today? And some people will have loved the podcast and be so pleased that load up with the book because they love the podcast, and now they've got the book version. And like you said, some people just don't listen to podcasts, and so now it's like, oh great, I never could get into listening to the podcast, but this is me, this is what I want too. So that's the beauty of repurposing.
Definitely.
So when I got in touch with you and said, hey, I was so amazed at that wonderful book that you did and how it was repurposed from the podcast and everything. And you said to me, well, that's one story of how cool we are at repurposing. Well, I have another cool story about repurposing. So you said that this isn't the first time that you have used repurposing for your books, because you've got 2 other books as well, haven't you? So
yeah.
What was the story with those from
the first one, as I said, it was kind of, it doesn't really count as repurposing, I guess, because it did start as a blog post that I was just writing like one tip at a time on my iPad. When I very first got an iPad, and I was convinced that my entire business could now be operated from an iPad. So it was kind of blog post that turned into something else, which I did a lot of repurposing from that. But the second book, which I wrote with Callie, and actually, I've got to say, I'm talking about all this great work that we did with the book as though I was like the mastermind of it. In no way, shape, or form was I the driving force with it. Callie did she did all the heavy lifting with the book. Obviously, we planned and we strategized it together. She didn't just turn up one day and say, "Okay, I've just wrote this book." But she did so much, definitely the lion's share, and then some of all this recent book. The second book was definitely much more collaborative, and it started life as a challenge. So it was an email challenge that we used as part of the initial launch of Membership Academy, which is our membership about memberships. When we were starting out, we didn't have that big an audience. So we started blogging, we started podcasting in the June or the July of 2015 under the Membership Guys brand, because we've been running an agency before then and not really putting out too much content. And then we launched our product at the end of August. So it was a very, very short window of time that we'd given ourselves to build our email list. So we used a challenge as a way of accelerating that. It was a 30-day challenge. So build your membership site in 30 days. And it was designed as a step-by-step daily email challenge that you would receive that would help you to piece everything together to get a simple membership up and running at the end of those 30 days. Yeah. So it was quite meaty. And, some challenges you do, they don't really have much of a tangible outcome. This did. 80% of people who come into our world, what they want to be able to know how to do, first and foremost, is start a membership. Yeah. And so this kind of knocked down that kind of big hurdle that so many people wanted. So again, it was one of those things that once we were launched, so we used that as a lead in for the launch of the product. Then once it was launched, we were like, what do we do with this now? It's a wealth of content. It was all written content. There was some video in there, some obviously some diagrams, some text stuff, but there was so much written material in there. I think it was somewhere around about 20 to 30,000 words, easily minimum, and a lot of kind of workbooks and activities to go with them. So it was a rich source of content. So we'd originally kind of put that challenges into our membership as just an extra little course that was in there, and we thought nothing more of it until we started actually getting some people kind of saying, are you planning on doing this challenge again? Rah, 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 rah. So we started looking at, okay, well, we don't want to run the challenge in real time like we previously did, because we were running the membership day to day. So actually facilitating a real-time challenge wasn't something we then wanted to do. But that got us on the line of thinking, okay, well, how can we get more value from this? How can we put this to better use? And how can we put this in a format that is accessible to more people? And we landed on a book. So this was 2016, I think. We probably overestimated how much we had to work with. So like I say, it was maybe about 20,000 words, possibly, might have been a little bit less. That doesn't make for a very big book. Like, it really doesn't. We see some people that bring out books, and it's basically like, dude, you might not bother. This is a leaflet. Like, this isn't a book. This is a leaflet. This could have just been a free PDF, and we didn't want to do that. So we filled in a lot of the gaps, and we actually repurposed a lot of blog content to complement the email challenges.
Yeah.
So a lot of the chapters in the book, part of it started life as the email challenge, but actually maybe that day's email was just a paragraph or two and it was more about the activity. And so we then supplemented it with blog content, and that blog content for the most part was just like for like. That wasn't remixed. That was put in there as pretty much as it was on the blog. And yeah, in kind of doing that, and obviously I would probably say it was about 40% the original email challenge, maybe about 40% blog content and 20% originally written content just for the book.
Yeah.
And the end result was a decent sized book that's done quite well and has gone down as quite popular, and kind of give us our first little joint publication there.
No, it's such a cool story. And I often say that you should always create content with repurposing in mind, and don't let repurposing be an afterthought and things like that. But I also think that you need to just always be really open-minded and quite, like agile with your content and how you perceive it and the value of it and what you can do with it. And I think this is just such a good example that you knew you were sitting on something really good here, and you knew you could make so much more from it. And it's all about getting back the time and effort that you put in, isn't it? And it's so cool that you just kind of recognize that, and you thought, right, what can we do? And then through the combination of the great content for the challenge combined with, right, where are our gaps? Okay, well, we can fill loads of those gaps with all these really good blog posts that we put lots of effort into. It will help people. And then some of the gaps we'll fill with new content. And I'm sure you're probably going to say that even the new content that you created for the book, you probably repurposed that into blog posts and things like that.
I've got a feeling that we did.
Most likely. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and since then, we've when it comes to our membership, we've since kind of brought out a new kind of almost flagship course within the membership, which is centered around that initial startup stage of getting a membership site started, which is the same topic as the book. So when it came time for us to create that, we were then able to turn to the book as a reference point for making sure we had all the bases covered inside the membership as well. So obviously the course goes way further than the book does, but we were able to take some parts of what we wrote as original content for the book and use that as a starting point to then flesh out further. I think it's, for us, what we always have to keep in mind with our business is, for a large part, we are a content business. Yeah. We make money from selling content, and we market that product through content. So we use free content to market paid content. But the problem with that model is that there's a real danger of there being too much free content out there. If someone's overwhelmed with your free content, they're never going to pay to access premium content. And so we're always very, very wary of putting out too much stuff. And definitely those early days, I think, we always had that impression, that opinion of, okay, well, we can't have, if I put a blog post out on this topic, then we can't then cover that same topic in the podcast, because that means we've got two pieces of content on the same topic. And so, what can we do to get around that? And we've kind of been mindful of that sort of thing, of not just having like so much duplication or, a lot of different, like a lot of stuff that just makes it harder for people to get to the actual real value, and also makes it less likely that they'll come and they'll join the membership. So that has driven us to be more conscious of repurposing opportunities. Yeah. To make sure that, instead of having a podcast that's its own piece of content about one topic, and then a blog post that touches on a similar topic, but they're not the same, and then a video that is sort of similar. And so, if someone asks a question, you've got to direct them to 3 different places. Instead, how can we actually create like a blog post where we could also embed the podcast, where we could also embed the video and all that sort of stuff? Because that makes it less noisy on the free content, which clears the way a little bit more for the membership. But it's a tricky balance, and I think repurposing helps us like tread that line a little bit.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That's the approach that we take, where when people, for example, this podcast episode, people can enjoy it through listening, or we'll write a long form, decent write up of what we've discussed, and we just put it together. And we say, this is what you're going to get from this content. Read on if you want to read, click play if you want to listen.
Yeah.
And just, and I usually do a video as well, just a short video explaining some of the key learning points and that kind of thing. Because I agree, if it's one place, but consume the same, type of message and content, and get to the value in the way that best suits you, but keeping things a bit more in a similar place on our website. Although, different challenges, we don't lead on to the membership, of course, but similar kind of ethos. I think I love the stories that you shared of how you had all this great content, and on multiple occasions now, so you've been able to create these really good books. I think it just goes to show as well, and I say this a lot, that although, as I said, create content often with repurposing in mind, sometimes it's not always the case, because you need to just constantly have your eyes open and be willing to pivot and change and repurpose, because you just don't know what opportunities are going to present. But I think my point always is that you should focus on quality to begin with, because none of this would have been possible if you guys didn't focus on quality to begin with. So all those episodes of the guest interviews about membership site owners that became the book were all high quality to begin with, which is why they repurposed like a dream into a really, really good book. And then the challenge, really good quality, or the blog post. I think it all comes down to, if it's really good quality content, there's so much more opportunities than just not putting as much effort into that first original piece. Just, I'll do 10 blog posts this week. And then you find that, well, actually, they're not that easy to repurpose, because they're not that high quality, and there's not that much thought put into them.
It's like that thing, it's a bit crass, but when people say you can't polish a turd, you could mold a turd into the shape of a ball, or mold the turd into the shape of a square. It's still a turd.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't. If the source material is rubbish, it doesn't matter how you shape it or how you present it. It's still a turd. Yeah. So I think absolutely right. And I don't think, honestly, we've ever created a single, and this might be contrary to how you would advise us to approach it, but I don't think we've ever created something with repurposing in mind later on. I do that a little more these days with the podcast, because now you've extolled the deeper virtues of podcast of repurposing to me, so I'm now more mindful of it. I do it with the podcast, but the challenge was never created with a thought process of, oh, well, if we make this good, we could repurpose this later. The behind the membership was never done with a thought process of, one day this might make for a good case study. We just, we set out to make it the best version of what it was, without worrying too much about the format it was in, and without it being we weren't setting out to make the best podcast. We were setting out to tell the best stories.
Yeah.
We don't set out to create the best blog post. We set out to create the best answer to a question, the best solution to a problem. And I think that, taking that broader view and recognizing that we set aside, whether blogs, videos, podcasts, courses, or memberships, coaches, or service business, whatever, like when we strip everything away at the core, all of us in business, literally every single person in business, all we do is solve problems. That is, we are all in the business of providing solutions to a problem. And I think having that mindset with your content, like you're not writing a blog post, you are creating a solution to someone's problem. And for some people, the problem is just, I don't know the answer to this thing. I don't know how to do this thing. And your post, your podcast, your video is the solution. And that's it. But if you think of things, in my opinion anyway, certainly how we do it, if you think of things in that way and that context, then I think it makes what you create inherently repurposable, because it's not locked into a particular format. That the format it gets published in is just the first format it's published in. Yeah. It's the starting point, and then you leave yourself room to take it even further. And I think the other thing I would say definitely for us, that we probably realized relatively early on when we started repurposing blog posts into podcasts into blog posts and whatever, is I think sometimes people think of repurposing as a means of being lazy, like of being able to, I can get a podcast episode out this week without really having to put any effort, or I can't be bothered to do a blog post this week, so what I'll do is I'll get a transcript, and I'll just rejig it a little bit, or I'll just post it as is. And I think looking at it as this is just a low effort thing, as opposed to this is a way of extracting more value from content we've already created, and literally giving it additional purpose. I think that was the mindset shift we had to recognize. And I think when we talk about the book, yes, it was repurposed, but we also had to put a lot of original content in and reshape some of the original iteration of what was repurposed. We had to expand on it. We had to put some thought into it. And certainly in those very early days, we tripped up a couple of times on that, and the end result was rubbish.
But it's just it's always offering that starting point, isn't it? It's and then you morph it into the new way that you're going to solve that problem in a different format. Oh, I totally agree with you, and it's so funny. Just leaving on this, but saying that everything you said, I couldn't agree with you more. And I recently saw a post in a Facebook group. I think it was the Podcast Movement Facebook group, and somebody asked the question, "Should I repurpose my podcast?" And someone's reply was, repurposing is the laziest thing anyone could do, or something like that. It's so lazy, you don't know how anyone could do it. And when I probably had a million responses to that, and that was one of those where you just think, I am going to walk away from this one.
And the thing is, you know what, it is if that is the way you use repurposing in your business, then it is the laziest thing you possibly do. But that's a choice. You choose to do it as an alternative to doing hard work. But I always like the example you use of Les Mis, which how many different ways has that been put out there? You've got the movie, you've got books, you've got the stage show. And even kind of the opportunities for other people to then latch on to little bits of that, and you get parodies and all that sort of stuff. Like it's all about your mindset. And I do think now when you see you will notice this certainly more than me, as you get with any industry, you start getting people cropping up representing the topic in the wrong way. And when they advise you to do repurposing, what they're really encouraging you to do is to phone it in and to use a bit of software as a substitute for actually putting some thought into the content you create. So you're probably going to see more and more people be like, "Oh, well, repurposing, yeah, it's real cool. I just press this button and then I've done repurposing." But there's thought and there's strategy. It's stuff you're putting out there to represent your business. So you shouldn't be taking the lazy approach. So I would have gone. Did you go off on that guy at the Facebook group, or did you just leave it?
I completely left it. It's one of those where do I let this person on the internet who I don't know take up a lot of my time, but and kind of make a post like you just kind of think, oh, do I just get on with my day? Forget about that.
You've got to pick a hill to die on.
You have, exactly, yeah. And like you said, it's just, it's different definitions and all of that. But I think we both sing from the same hymn sheet. And thank you so much for coming back on the show, Mike. Second time returning. I've only had 2 people come back on twice before, so
you're thinking I might be in the first.
Oh, sorry. I think I got Ian Anderson Gray back on when I wanted to jump into the world of LinkedIn Live, and I got him on that week. That's okay. So it was a good guess, yeah. So right, we should stick a pin in it there because we could talk forever, couldn't we? So, I'll put obviously links to all of your website and where everyone can find you on social and all of that in the show notes. But for anyone listening right now who perhaps show notes isn't their thing, where can people go? Where was the one place you would send people to?
Yeah, head on over to themembershipguys.com. We got all sorts of cool free resources there, as well as links off to other ways in which you can connect with us. But yeah, themembershipguys.com, you'll find our podcast, blog, and all that good stuff on that website.
Wonderful. All right. That's great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for being a great guest again. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who's listened to this week's episode of the Content 10X podcast. I'm sure you got loads from it, and I'm sure everyone is now inspired to go and look at their content and see if they have a book to create as well. So thanks, Mike. It's been great.
Thank you for having me on. It's always fun getting to chat repurposing content and all that good stuff with you.
Thank you.